Hi everybody. Today we're going to be talking about the evolution of the first plants. About 440 million years ago, the plant that we see here pictured on the right is called Aglophyton, had evolved to live on dry land. And this is considered to be one of the first plants. Remember, before this time, all life lived in the ocean in the form of bacteria or the form of protist after them. Right? And Aglophyton represent very, very early plants. So what do all plants have in common? For the type of cell that makes up plants, it's always going to be eukaryotic cell. This is a more advanced type of cell with a nucleus and all these other fancy organelles that we've been talking about. Plants are always multicellular. Right? So there's no such thing as a unicellular plant. Right? They're always made up of multiple cells. Plants will always have a cell wall. The chemical that makes up the cell walls of plants is something called cellulose. Right? This is important because it's different than the cell wall that makes up bacteria. Bacteria have a cell wall called made of a chemical called peptidoglycan. So plants didn't get cell walls from bacteria, they evolved it on their own. And then for the energy requirements, plants are photosynthetic autotrophs. Alright, so they don't ever have to eat anything to get the nutrients they need to survive. They get it through photosynthesis and converting energy from sunlight. The reproduction of these early plants is what's most strange, alright? Many plants can reproduce sexually and asexually, but the sexual process for these early plants is something called alternation of generations. Right, this is defined as the regular alternation between forms of reproduction in the life cycle of an organism. It's strange to us because we don't have anything like this, right? But plants have two ways to reproduce, especially in these early plants, right? And if we look at this diagram right here, the first generation is something called a sporophyte, right? And that reproduces with spores. However, these spores will eventually grow into the second form of the plant's life cycle called a gametophyte. Right? And the gametophyte reproduces with gametes, which are sperm cells and egg cells. Right? The combination of a sperm cell and egg cell will lead to a new sporophyte, which again reproduces with spores. Right? So the two generations are sporophyte and gametophyte, and they differ in what they use for reproduction. So a little bit more about these two generations of the plant life cycle. The sporophyte generation is named the sporophyte generation because it uses spores for reproduction. Now, it's always made up of diploid cells. A diploid cell is defined as a cell that has a full set of chromosomes. Right? So if you look at our cells, we're almost entirely made up of diploid cells, which is for us a cell that has 46 chromosomes. The second generation of the plant's life cycle is the gametophyte generation. The gametophyte generation is the generation that reproduces with gametes. Your gametes are your sperm cells and egg cells. Right? Now, for us, our sperm cells and egg cells are the only haploid cells that we have in our body. A haploid cell is different than a diploid cell because a haploid cell has half the number of chromosomes. So while we're entirely made up of diploid cells with 46 chromosomes, our sperm cells and egg cells only have 23 chromosomes because they're haploid and have half the number of chromosomes. So in the diagram that we see here, this is the sporophyte stage made up of diploid cells that have a full set of chromosomes. However, when it reproduces, each of these spores only receives half the number of chromosomes that a diploid cell would normally have. The gametophyte generation, which grows out of these spores, all the cells that we see here have half the number of chromosomes. However, the sperm and the egg, which are still haploid, when they combine, now they form one cell that has a full set of chromosomes, and we return to the diploid or sporophyte stage. Guys, this idea of alternations of generations and understanding the difference between sporophyte and gametophyte is the most difficult part of this entire chapter. However, stick with it. If it doesn't make sense right now, it'll eventually click in your brains, hopefully sometime soon, because we're going to revisit this throughout the chapter. Alright guys, that's it for today.